So, you got sent to the police station today, Leo? My dad smirked from the couch as I finally got home. Part of me wanted to tell him to shut up, but another part of me wanted to discuss everything with him. I went upstairs, shoved my backpack in my closet, and then walked to the couch to discuss everything with my dad. The crimes they accused me of were completely false, I said as my dad rolled his newspaper up and placed it at his side. Fraud, larceny, and attempted murder, my dad suspiciously said. They couldn't have faked those accusations. You'd be very surprised in that case. Matter of fact, actually, the police officers were willing to help in my fraud. Your fraud? My dad's booming voice shouted through the house. No wonder you were taken by the police. More like an alias, but let me explain everything real quick. I managed to stay calm even after a major misunderstanding. After a short pause, I continued speaking. I created that fraud. Well, I actually got help to create that fraud, but anyways, I made that fraud so people would stop going up to me saying, "Is it really Leo Taurus?" My dad gave me a skeptical look. Don't you think a fraud would be a bit too far? Not at all, actually. I shot a slight smile in his direction, shifting a bit. Besides, the officers said they would help keep my David Martinez fraud so long as I helped them with investigating the homicides of Joshua Franklin and Mayor Xavier. I thought Joshua wasn't a homicide victim. Tell that to the police chief, I cooed. He's the one who issued those cases. As my dad began to unfold his newspaper and continue reading, the doorbell rang. I leaped up and managed to get the door first, completely beating out my dad. I swung the door open and was greeted by a nicely dressed young teenage girl, a large envelope in her hand. Hello, my name is Adeline Lynn from City Hall, the girl said. I'm here to drop off a letter for David Martinez from Clyde Smith. Adeline Lynn? That was the Adeline I knew from the fair. That was the Adeline that was head over heels in love with Christopher. That was the Adeline who was my friend. Adeline? I exclaimed in shock. I could clearly tell her mannerisms got a lot better throughout the time we hadn't seen each other. It's me, Leo, I shouted in excitement. Leo Taurus, remember me? Adeline's eyes widened as she heard my name being said out of my mouth. You mean the Leo that helped us save the city and the one that was present during that horror Fair Ordeal? I nodded. Then why does it say your name is David Martinez on the envelope? She suspiciously asked. I changed my identity, but that doesn't matter. I'm still Leo Taurus by heart. At that moment, I didn't quite realize that those officers had actually gone into the database and changed my name to my fraud name. Well, may I step inside so we could chat for a bit longer? She asked. Sure, take a seat on the couch and I'll grab you a glass of water, I replied as I gestured her to her inside. My dad, who was still on the couch, raised an eyebrow at me at the sight of Adeline sitting down on the couch, right across from my dad. Adeline, he exclaimed. I shot a look back at my dad. She came to drop an envelope off. I smiled. This is the girl that Christopher is in love with, right, Leo? My dad shouted back as I began filling up a glass with water. Uh-huh. As I finished filling up the glass of water, I left the kitchen. My dad was starting up some chit-chat with Adeline. I could tell Adeline was blushing after hearing her boyfriend's name, Christopher. I hadn't heard from both of them in a long time. What high school do you and Christopher go to? I asked Adeline as I handed her the glass of water. The one across town from Greenfield High School, Adeline replied as she began to take a sip of water from her glass. Oh, so Whitnall High School? My dad said. Adeline silently nodded. I'm switching to Greenfield High School by the end of first quarter. You work for City Hall now? I blurted out. Yeah, actually. Chris was also offered the job, but he declined because he's afraid he's going to get murdered by Mr. Franklin. I rolled my eyes in contempt. I thought it was free money, so I said sure, why not? In a heartbeat, I was now a messenger and agent for the city. I noticed that the envelope Adeline was still holding in her hands. You said that envelope was for me? Adeline nodded as she moved her hand closer to me so I could grab the envelope. Heard that it might be an employment letter but I'll let you read the contents for yourself. An employment letter? If I managed to score a job at City Hall, that would be amazing. I could possibly be in the same league as Adeline and possibly Clyde. I scrambled to read the contents of the letter, eventually pulling out the huge rolled-up paper that was stuffed neatly into the envelope. From Clyde Smith to Leo Taurus, David Martinez. Hello, we are looking to reach out to you on August 28th, 2019 at 4 p.m. for a meeting at City Hall to discuss employment opportunities and detective cases. The people present at this meeting include Adeline Lynn, Christopher Clyde Smith, and Officer Mary. Other people may be involved in this meeting, though that has been undecided yet. To keep the contents of this letter confidential, burn this paper after you've finished reading it. After the grief of Mayor Xavier's death, we need your help to solve this case. But I know your ideologies involve revenge and righteousness, Leo. You had to go through the grief of Joshua's death, and now it's Mayor Xavier's. You have to go through. The grief you may face next is the grief you'll never experience because you're the one who dies. Be careful with these frauds and groups you're slowly securing ties with. You're tying yourself to a floating pole, and once those ropes go loose, you're falling to your death. I warned you, Leo Taurus. Sincerely, Clyde Smith, City Hall Secretary and Secret Agent. My hands trembled after reading the letter. Sweat was developing on my face. I began to slowly and quietly tear the paper apart. Hey, Dad, can we start a bonfire in the backyard for a moment, I asked. No, what do you need it for? My dad snapped at me, veins bulging in his neck. You know what, forget about it. I continued ripping the letter up before throwing it away in the trash. Why do you need a bonfire? Were you planning to burn the letter? Adeline asked curiously. I sat back on the couch, ignoring Adeline's question. Well, there's a meeting on the 28th at City Hall? Yeah, I'll be there. Clyde will be there too, Adeline interjected. You're going too, right? I nodded my head. I don't know if your mom will be happy with that, Leo, my dad said. She hates it when you're alone at City Hall with random strangers. I don't care what she thinks. You will after you get grounded for longer. I rolled my eyes in typical teenage rebellious style. Well, I better get going now, Adeline said, breaking the silence. I have a meeting shortly with Master Johnny and Clyde. Master Johnny, I exclaimed. You get to talk to him? Adeline nodded. The rumors about him being a nice, cool person really were true. Adeline emerged from the couch, handing me the empty glass of water. Thank you for the water. I'll see you later, Leo. Adeline walked out of the front door, eventually leaving in a parked police car outside of my house. City Hall, Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. A heat wave had struck Greenfield over the past few days. The sweltering heat and high humidity made it unbearable to walk in the afternoon, but here I was after school, walking in these deadly conditions. My mom wasn't going to drop me off at City Hall. I had to transport myself there regardless of the conditions. Sure, would I be in a lot of trouble once I got back home? Yes, but it's worth it if I get to meet with Clyde and chat with a friend that I haven't spoken to in a long time. City Hall was closer to Greenfield High School than my home is to the school, so the walk to City Hall was 15 minutes faster than the walk from the school to my home. I felt like passing out from the excessively warm temperatures, begging for a light breeze or a glass of cold water to dump on myself, but rather had the relentless sun continue to beat on my perspiring covered body. Luckily, I managed to sprint into City Hall right before I most likely suffered from some sort of heat stroke. That feeling of that cold air rushing to me after entering the building was the best feeling ever. I looked like I had just exited from a shower. Hello, Leo, Clyde said as he emerged from a seat located somewhere within the building. You look like you just went for a swim. Are you okay? I nodded my head as my audible panting continued. It's just so darn hot outside. I gave Clyde a good look. His face had a visible scar planted on his left cheek. He looked completely fine, however. I was surprised he managed to survive the attack performed by Mr. Franklin. I glanced up at the analog clock hung right above the receptionist's desk. It read 4:02 p.m. I made it to City Hall in perfect timing for the meeting, just a little bit late. Adeline and Officer Mary are waiting in a conference room currently, so we can begin walking over there and start the meeting up. Clyde signaled me to follow him through a door right beside the receptionist's desk. He grabbed a huge ball of keys from his waist and soon began to unlock the door, letting me in first. This would be my second time ever being inside City Hall, especially these parts that many people aren't allowed to be in. The aroma inside smelled like a library, and the carpet was dazzled with colors and patterns. The many doors in the hallways we were walking through reminded me of a hotel. Each door had a key lock and keypad. Eventually, we reached the third to last door in the hallway. Clyde punched in the code for the room before the door eventually unlocked. "Hello, Clyde. Hello, David," Officer Mary greeted, sitting adjacent to Adeline, who was holding a large handful of papers. "You can call me Leo for short," I said. The conference room we were brought into had a massive wooden round desk plopped in the middle with wooden chairs surrounding the table. In the corner of the room sat a computer and a large printer. That was the corner Clyde was headed to as he began to unlock the computer. I took a seat next to Adeline. "All right, everybody," Clyde said as he began furiously typing on the keyboard. "So who here has caught word of Greenfield High School's bully group?" "The Clyde killers, you mean?" I said. "The Clyde killers?" Adeline questioned as shock riddled her face. "Weird name for a group, huh?" Officer Mary said. Clyde continued to type on the computer, then stopped to ask more questions. "What do you know about this group, Leo?" I quietly gulped. "Well, for one, they have a weird name. Number two, they're planning on murdering me. Number three, I paused before continuing. I had to admit the cold hard truth to everybody in this room. Somebody helped me with an ongoing fraud. Adeline and Officer Mary gasped. "Clyde, he's a criminal!" Officer Mary shouted. "Calm down. Leo, you're a fraudster?" Adeline asked, cutting Clyde off. "No, he isn't, Adeline. Everybody shut up and calm down. He never committed fraud. He had reason to prove by the police department itself for the charge in identity and fraud, or the change in identity and fraud." Clyde yelled at the top of his lungs. Officer Mary raised one eyebrow at Clyde. "Are you sure?" "I'm 100% sure." "Adeline, hand me the papers in your hand." Clyde slid across the vinyl floor in his seat to Adeline. Adeline reluctantly gave the papers to Clyde before Clyde slid back to his desk, still in his seat, and swiftly began shuffling through the papers. "And here, Officer Mary." Clyde stopped shuffling through the stack of papers, now handing over a few thin slices of paper to Officer Mary. She grabbed them almost immediately and began scrutinizing the papers. Silence settled in the room, and judging by Officer Mary's facial expression, she was astonished by the contents of the papers. "But this just can't be right, Clyde. You guys can't just excuse such a serious crime like this." Clyde stood up from his seat and snatched the papers from Officer Mary's hands. "Well, he's completely innocent, regardless of what you think." Clyde went back to his desk and handed back the stack of papers to Adeline, who then began shuffling through them. "Next up, we have bloodshed under a first quarter moon, a.k.a. the death of Mayor Xavier," Adeline slowly said. "What do you know about his death, Leo?" "He was hung by a rope over a fiery pit, his wrists and throat slit," I replied. "Yes, but do you know how they got him into such a position?" "Anesthetics and Satan." The eerie silence that filled the room after that sentence was disturbing. "But Satan isn't real. He's just a made-up devil." I was there at the circus, Leo, and I was there when the ground crumbled and sent us to the underworld. Satan is just as real as anybody could ever imagine. I saw him with my very own eyes." Adeline became teary-eyed after she spoke. "I was there at the circus way before anybody else was there. For a bit, I saw Mayor Xavier standing on the bow of the stage before being taken behind the curtains by that fancy-dressed man who was the star of the circus, Gabriel Johnson." "Gabriel Johnson? Like, you mean the Gabriel that's part of Mr. Franklin's crew?" My eyes expanded as I put two and two together and realized that everything now made sense. Gabriel was the killer of Mayor Xavier and also the star of the circus. He was the one who was dragging me across the floor and into the pit of fire that Mayor Xavier's dead body was hovering over. "Adeline," Clyde started, "you never told anybody here any of that information. Thank you for telling us that." Clyde was seemingly smashing the keyboard as he was typing. "But now we need to talk about Joshua Franklin's death, which Leo actually witnessed completely," Adeline said as she put 5 papers down on the table. "I don't know how he died. He started choking on seemingly nothing as he bled out from everywhere on his body," I replied, this time being able to talk about Joshua without bawling out like a baby. Clyde continued to type on the computer. "This meeting is now excused, everybody. The next meeting is on September 2nd. Adeline left the stack of papers she was holding on the table as everybody, including myself, got up from the seats and began walking to the door. "But Leo, stay here and wait for me to finish up my work. We're going somewhere soon."